Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at the APIv2 webinar. I'm Steve Luminati, the lead web project manager at EIA, and I'm grateful to be joined by my fellow panelists, the public affairs team, who who help prep our speakers, such as myself, and handle all our outreach and social media, so please be nice to them, and a gifted web development team who made the API possible. And not only do they write the API, they handle all the technical operation of the website, including the API, publish data, and what have you. So we very much appreciate the advanced questions you sent in. If you write to opendata@eia.gov, that's us. But obviously, there are very few of us. So thank you for your patience if it takes a while to get back to you. But we read every single message you send us. And here I am in your corner, just so you can see the face behind the voice. All right, let's get started. So thank you for filling out the advanced registration. And here is the breakdown of how people gauge their familiarity with APIv2. So I've customized this presentation based on that. And here were your interests. That's great. People want to see the hands-on how-to, so I will dedicate most of this time with that. Some other ground rules. Obviously, we have a diverse audience and experience. Experts, hang in with me. I know the basics API, you may know that already, but that's okay. Just maybe you'll pick up something along the way, and we'll get to the advanced later. If you have questions, we received them. If you submitted them prior, we have the Q&A open. My friend Morgan will be triaging them, and hopefully we'll have a break in the middle to give us a brain break, and then we'll address certainly more at the end. This will be a live demo. I know it's chic to have pseudo live demos. We're actually just a recorded video, but this will be the real thing. So you'll see me using a web browser, and as it is a live demo, you'll probably see me fumble typing once or twice, so bear with me. And for the record, this session is being recorded. The slides will definitely be posted on the Open Data site. The video, we hope to. We just need to get a video editor to support us there. That may be me, who knows. Okay, so the basics of an API, because some people were interested, I know others are not, and as you can tell, I am quite the geek, so you'll get a few 80s references and sci-fi quotes in here, so you'll have to cope with that. Okay, so an API, for those who don't know, it is a means by which we expose internal systems and functions to other people who are not EIA. And APIs are very common right now. And today's complex software, between your phone, aircraft, games, commerce, they all rely on APIs to work. We know we couldn't have the modern internet without them. If you've ever clicked on Pay with Amazon Pay or signing with your Google account on a third-party site, that's APIs talking back and forth. If you say crocheters.com and they say log in with Amazon to pay, Amazon is not exposing all your credit card information to crochet.com. They're just validating, yes, that's a valid credit number. Yes, this is their shipping address. So that's a way to share what you want to and let people play with what you're offering without exposing them and letting everyone into your system. In this case, EI's API is read-only and is data-only. Other APIs, you can actually poke things, like Amazon has APIs that say, yes, I got it, or Shipper, hey, I've done this, and they update their database. In this case, API is read-only. On APIs, yes, that's assembler on the left. Without APIs, we would be hand coding things like this. APIs and their brother, object-oriented programming, allow people to write each different tier of that pyramid. So I don't have to write, if I'm writing a GPS app, I don't have to write, the operating system for the phone, the GPS subsystem, the app, the little arrows, the voice. I can call other people's work. And that's how modern software is written today. So, and I use this actually, some of this content for internal audiences too, to reinforce why an API is important. So if you're new, like, why do I use the API? I can just, in fact, we got a question saying, I'm used to cut and pasting from the website. Why can't I just, why use an API? Well, here are some of the reasons. It's a way to get a quick hit on data and not have to worry about the presentation. The API, as you'll see, it just returns flat data in something called JSON or XML, if that's your preference. And you don't have to muck with the data. You don't have to click around a website. The old way of doing it is something called a screen scraper or a web scraper, where if I wanted to pull out, well, if you wanted to pull out data from EIA, for example, you would write a scraper that reads the web page, and it would probably be dependent on where we put the data in the web page. Like, did we use a headline? Is it bolded? Is it not? And if we change that presentation in any way, your scrapers would probably break. So this is a way to completely separate the data from the API. And this web team wrote most of the visualizations you see on EIA.gov, but hey, they're not for everyone. You may disagree with the choices EIA made. You may want to see data a certain way, and an API lets you do that. The most important thing about a takeaway, the last basic on API, is a RESTful API, which is what we're using, is stateless. And what stateless means is the server has no memory of what you typed before. This is different than, say, the Amazon.com experience, where once you log in, it doesn't ask you every time. A RESTful API is stateless, which is why you have to provide your key every single request you make. All right, that's the basics of the API. Business and design. And the biggest one is, why are you killing APIv1 EIA? Can't you just leave me alone? And we hear you. I hate it when Microsoft says it's time to get rid of Windows 7. Migration pain is a real thing. But here's what we're thinking, and here's why we did what we did. Okay, so if you're using V1 now, you know it was launched, maybe you don't, over 10 years ago, and has grown tremendously. It hosts 1.8 million individual data series, and it's garnered almost 200,000 users. Since we built APIv1 in 2012, a lot has changed on the internet, and some of the things there. APIs are now kind of an expectation. They have to have more mature, just like, our web browsers have changed a whole lot since 2010. I hope no one's still using Mozilla Netscape, but we'll leave that alone. And EIA has evolved as well. When I first joined 12 years ago, it was largely, I would call it a paper first. We were focused on the annual energy outlook, the short-term energy outlook, as a book or a PDF, and that's how we sent it around. And we were starting to move into a web first, and now EI is transitioning to a data first operation, meaning that the data should be the first thing that goes out, along with the website. And although people still collect the AEO, and that's great, but we're kind of shifting our balance to there. And you've heard the term big data. That's kind of related. Okay, so an API1 call, and I'll explain how I'm going to show this demo. When I do a presentation, I know that when I share my web browser, it may be tough to see the URL. So I'm going to diagram an API call here with this, and then I'll color code the parts of the API call with this URL call here. So an API call consisted of a target, or the host, the verb. Now we only support get, but other verbs can be used, like post or update. And then the series ID, this string of characters. And then you had a few modifier, like number of rows. So why APIv2 if API1 is working with that series ID? Well, modern APIs are three things, and this one's important. Machine discoverable, which means that because how we designed V2, if you wrote a an Explorer program, you can traverse our data tree automatically and determine by itself, your program, what's available, what metadata, what fields, etc. You don't have to go to ei.gov and use the web browser to query, oh, I want electricity data. Oh, here are the magic codes to do that. Modern V2 should be human readable, and that means that I can read the URL. This, I guess, if I'm smart enough, I understand that it's electricity sales co-res, that's Colorado resident, but an average person wouldn't know that. So it should be, a modern call should be human readable. And then self-describing. The API itself explains how to use it, what data, facets, and parameters are available. So why did we do V2? We did a whole bunch of requirements gathering. We took the feedback that we got for 10 years, and here's what we came up with. So first, no secret knowledge required. So V1, as you know, uses the series ID equals in a string of characters. We wanted to get away from that. data quality. So API v2 offers EI's data to you very differently than V1. V1 was pre-baked, so we made those data series in a very specific way. V2 reaches back to the analyst and energy expert approved public-facing databases. So you get data much more quickly into the API than you did in V1. Uh, and it doesn't contain business logic, V2. We take what exactly the analyst says and we say, okay, that's the number, that's the price, and we don't transform it, we don't process it. So that helps with data quality. If someone says, hey, I think this number's wrong, we know 90% of the time it's not the API because the API doesn't touch the data. We also wanted to improve the metadata, improve the security and reliability, and creature comforts like errors and warnings. And you'll see an example of that in a bit. And that what looks like an API v2 call. It's a little complicated. Don't worry, during the hands-on, we will slowly build this out and explain it. But now we have a route here, which when a route in a RESTful API is more or less a directory path. We have v2, we have electricity. We could go down petroleum or natural gas. Instead, if we dig in, then there are other options, retail sales, data, and a lot more options here. So you can slice the data how you want, as opposed to us pre-baking something and say, well, you get Happy Meal number 4, and that's what you get. Okay, so why are we sunsetting APIv1? Couldn't we run it in parallel? Well, yes, we could, but we looked at it and it really didn't make sense. We are a taxpayer-funded organization, so we have to watch our coppers, to use the term. So V1 and V2 use different data preparation mechanics, and so we were never going to continually update two APIs. So the data in API V1 would gradually age out. V2 will continue to receive new data sets. We get requests all the time. We want to do that, but we're not going to do it in both. So given that, we could recode V1 into our V2 architecture, and we considered it. And originally, that's what we were going to, well, V1 and V2 were going to be in the same architecture. Our hosting platform changed. And then we looked at, oh, well, V1, we have to recode all that. Does that make fiscal sense? Do we want to spend all that money doing that? And then the cost of ownership. Now we're maintaining two parallel systems with two different data publishing. That's a server cost, that's a bandwidth cost, that's a stat time cost. So that's why we're doing it. But you'll see, we heard you when we did the V2O community release that we wanted to add more migration tools for the community users. So hopefully you'll see those and they're helpful. I won't go through the roadmap. You can read our version notes up on the Open Data website. More or less, we did our community release in February 2022. Others may call that a public beta. We did our public launch, and the difference between those, I mean, code-wise, it was pretty much identical, but the data was verified by all our data energy experts as, yes, this is good data, it is publishing correctly, etc. And that's important. We are web geeks. Well, I'm a web geek, my web team, and we are not statisticians or energy experts. We are very much reliant on all those folks behind, that are doing all the number crunching, that are doing the analysis, that are doing the forecast to make this possible. So we want their gold stamp of approval. And we did some minor patches. We're at version 2.1 now, and this is really was focused on backwards compatibility and your feedback. And we're building the list for version 2.2 now. I don't have a scope or date for you yet, but we will communicate that. We have to get funding for it, and we're gathering that now. We know we want to extend the warning and error system, and we know we want energy analysts and folks to insert warnings into the API when they say, hey, we know this data is lagged, and so they can put it directly in your API call so that when you call it, you say, hey, this data looks old. Oh, yeah, there's an issue with it, or we didn't get the submission we wanted. So we definitely want to do that. And we're looking at the possibilities, more data sets. I would personally love to get the Google add-in working again, and what have you. So please keep sending your feedback to opendata@ei.gov because you can help drive what we build next. Okay, so there's the basics and why we did what we did. So let's get into the how-tos of it. And by the way, I want to, as a note, I want to congratulate and thank you for folks' honesty saying, yeah, I've never used the API v2 and I really don't know how it works. Because, as you saw in the earlier slide, that's how you learn, is to say, yeah, I don't know. I say it a lot. Okay, so if you haven't used the API, the first thing you do is register for a key, and you can do that. Here is our open data website. Okay, is that transmitting? Yes, good. You see me look over to my work computer. And just click right over here, register. It's free. We just need your email address. Easy peasy. The first step to getting it is use the table browser to get warmed up, and that is located here. Now, I know some folks prefer the V1 table browser, this one, and we've modified it based on your feedback, but this is far more powerful because it answers to V2 and it lets you slice and dice data how you want, and it builds the query for you. So if I'm interested in, well, I talk about electricity a lot, so let's give petroleum some love. I'm interested in prices, and you can see it says all the information here. We'll say weekly retail, and I want to know, I'll ask for product, and I'll go into this a bit, and I'll say, well, I'm interested in regular gasoline. Save that off. And there it is. Here's the call to get this data. And our API receives, if you're wondering what these are, we accept both a call via a URL, or you can put it in your headers. This is probably more programmery, but you can do it this way too. For purpose of this demo, I'll do it this way because I want to do it in a web browser. And then, as the geeks say, RTFM, please read the documentation. We also have a frequently asked questions on the Open Data website, and that's your best bet to get started. Okay, enough intro. Let's do this. Okay, so we'll start at the top. Remember, always use your API key instead of this one. I've generated this key for this session. You will use yours because this key, if everyone uses it, it's going to get throttled really quick. And we see the first basic call is, well, just stipulate the version. Let's see what that looks like. So APIe.gov, and I know it's hard to see, but I am typing up here. You good? And there's the key, and here's the response. Now, the API didn't give us data. It says, well, I have available routes of coal, crude oil, electricity, international, I can zoom in on this, natural gas, and so on. So the API is describing itself because all we said is, hey, API, give me version 2. Okay, it did it. All right, so let's drill down. So let's explore electricity. You saw us drill down in the query browser. Now we're going to do it via the API. So we'll gradually build our route or directory path if you think about, desktop. So electricity, and then we'll add retail sales. And the API responds, okay, I have electricity. Here's the description. Hey, I have subroutes available to you, or subcategories. Retail sales, operations, that's the real-time grid monitor, electricity profiles, general capacity facilities. What do you want? Well, okay, let's ask about retail sales. And now it gets us back. By the way, I'm using the same use case as in the documentation, so you can follow along, but this will work for anything. I mean, if I type in petroleum, it would spit out petroleum, and maybe we'll do that if we have time. So this is the last end of the route, and we can tell that because now it's advertising a subroute called data, and it says, okay, well, I have data columns for revenue, sales, price, and number of customers. And it also describes, well, what frequencies do you want that in, and what subcategories or facets, which are ways to slice and dice the data. Okay, well, that's great. Stop describing it. I want a data series. How do I get that? All right, so we must add data as the last node in the route. So we'll do that. And the API responds with, okay, well, I have data for Maine residential in March of 2015. I have data for Maine transport sector in 2015, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it told us we have data, but I don't see like actual data points. And that's because we need to tell the API, well, I want the prices, or I want the other thing, number of customers that you saw described earlier in this metadata call here. So this is sort of the equivalent in V1 where we pre-bake these in terms of, it would be elect dot, ret dot, et cetera, et cetera. And we have a V1 translator, so we'll see it at work. But so here's the metadata call. And now let us use this parameter data to say, to stipulate what we really want. Let me. This is Erlang coding, which I know many people are familiar with, but you put the web address and directory here, and then you have parameters. You start with a question mark, and then every other parameter is separated by an ampersand. And here's the result. Now we see, hey, I asked for the price column, and here it is. So Maine, March 2015, for the residential sector, the price was 14.81 cents per kilowatt hour. This is, again, the API is describing itself by telling you what units it's in. This is superior to like a common delimited ASCII or those kinds of flat file formats because, well, 14.81, what does that mean? Well, the API will tell you what that means. All right, now we can ask for more data columns. So let's add the number of customers and revenue to this return. Now, this is something you couldn't do in V1. You would have to make 3 individual calls. Here, we can just, I want customers and I want revenue. Now, by the way, you see the screen change twice. So the first one is, oh, that's Morgan answering questions. Excellent. So the first screen, that's the native JSON return, and I'm running a JSON formatter in my web browser, so we can actually see what's going on. So it's interesting that the data came back quickly, and that second lag you saw is actually the web browser taking long enough to chew on this and format it so we can read it. And I'm kind of impressed it takes that long because I'm a gamer geek and I'm on a pretty serious read right now. I'm just saying. All right, so here's the price, here are the number of customers for Maine and residential, and here's the revenue. So it returned all that to us. Oh, yes, a word on errors and warnings. So another thing we built into V2 is we wanted it to, and especially for 2.1, we extended it. We wanted the API to be able to programmatically warn you or give you an error that you can process. Either you can read it as a human being, or you can have your program detect it. So we have created errors and warnings. So in this case, we have a warning, and this is one of our most common questions we get at EIA. Um, the API, for performance reasons, is limited to only returning 5,000 rows. You can ask for more, but will only ever return 5,000. And you can see this by this total field. So for our query, there are actually 96,000 bits of data that are responsive to your request, but we can only return 5,000. We will always warn about this by saying, hey, there's a warning array. The warning is an incomplete return, and we explain, hey, this is the issue. So if you're writing a program to interface with our API, you can detect, does the warning array exist, and what is the warning? If it's incomplete return, you can respond accordingly. Let's intentionally throw an error. I don't want revenue. I want number of monsters. The API is going to return. It's not a like a blank or a 500. It says, hey, you didn't give me a right parameter. The correct parameters are revenue, sales, price, and what have you. Okay, so that's the basics of a hands-on API. I'm going to look over at my teams here and see, Morgan, do we have any questions that I can address right now, or should we just keep flying here?
So we do have a few questions about when API v1 is going to be retired, just so you can anticipate that coming up. Otherwise, we can go ahead and keep going and then address some of these later on.
Okay, I'll hit that one now. When V1 is to retire. So V1 is end of life. We get that question a lot. What exact day? And I'll be honest with the audience here. We're waiting on our hosting provider to finish building out the V2 architecture. We want it to be have multiple nodes so that if any one node goes down, the API is still available. That is under construction now, so we're not going to sunset V1. We're not going to terminate V1 until that's up. I'm told it's coming real soon now, so January, might be February, but please consider please consider V1 to be sunsetting this month. But I will send out an email through our public affairs folks with at least a 1 week warning, say, hey, no kidding, it's going to go dark on this week. Originally, it was going to be November, so more time to do our homework before the big exam. I hope that answers the question as best as I can. All right. Brain break? Let's get busy. Okay, so remember our last metadata return? Let me bring it up here. So let me kill the data. And always bring your key. Nope. Hey, that's wrong. I asked for data, so give me the data. I want a metadata return. So no slash data. And it said, hey, I've got these facets here, state ID and sector ID. Okay, well, let's explore those. Here's how we invoke them. We use the facets parameter and we say what facet we're going to use, and it's going to be residential. And we know we can do this because the metadata returns that, hey, I have facets, I have state ID, and I have sector ID. Now you would say, hey, Steve, that's great, but you're cheating a little. How do I know that I can use res? I'm so glad you asked that, Steve. And the answer is you can query on the facet itself. So let's do that. Retail sales, facet, sector ID, always bring along your API key. And the API responds, hey, the facets that are appropriate to sector ID are res for residential, commercial, everything, transportation, other, and industrial. The API also, by the way, if you haven't noticed, it always echoes back what you sent it. So you can, did you do what I thought I told you to do? And the version you're currently interfacing with. So that's how I got res out. So now that I have that, let's get it. So retail sales, I want data. I want data price. That. We're going to use price, facets, sector. Did I do sector? Yes, sector ID. The array is industrial or residential. Did I get it right? Huzzah. So now you'll see we don't have transportation, we don't have commercial, it's all residential data. So facets are a great way, if you've asked for too much data, facets are a great way to slice down into what specifically you're interested in. You'll notice that even though we've gotten rid of commercial and transportation sectors, we still are getting, there are still lots of rows available, and we still have the warning, hey, I'm still only going to return you 5,000. Okay, we can add multiple facets. So you saw sector ID and you saw state. So you can daisy chain those. So retail facets, sector ID, facets, state ID. Let's do Colorado. Doing for none. Now all we're getting is residential Colorado. Well, what if I want more? Well, I can ask for facet state ID Virginia. Now I'm going to get data for Virginia and scroll on down, Colorado. That's a use case. You may not want to do that, but you can see the possibility where you could pull all things in one API call rather than make 60 or 70. Okay, sorting. Now you saw here in this query that it's kind of scattered because it's how it came back from the database because we didn't say a sort order. So here's October, no, that's August 2014. Here's July 2012. Now Colorado's the next row. Well, that's not really useful to me. Now, if you have a program, your program can sort these data because these are all just JSON objects. But we can have the API sort for us as well by using the sort parameter. And you see here now we're building optional parameters in green here. So sort 0, we have to specify two things, both a column and a direction. We are on the web browser. Now, this URL is starting to get really long, so to respect your questions, I'll still mess with it, but I'm going to cut and paste some pre-caught ones. So here we are. We specify the sort order of column, sort on the period, or the time, for lack of a better term, and sort in ascending order. Okay, so we have there. That looks more like a date series, January 2001. February 2001, March 2001, April, and so on. Again, you don't have to use the sort, but the API will sort for you if you wish it to. Okay, now you saw in our metadata call something about frequency. I suppose the proper term is periodicity. Did I say that right? I think I did. All right, so that is, if we look back at our API meta call, let's go back to that. Pull all this out. Always bring your API key. Just like if you're hitchhiking the galaxy, always bring your towel. All right, here's the API key, and it said, hey, I have this data in monthly, in quarterly, and in annual. All right, so we can pick, in that call, we had it by month, and if you don't stipulate a frequency, we will pick the default one for you. But we saw that there was earlier, so let's add the parameter frequency equals annual. And now we're getting it by year. So I talked briefly about defaults, but you'll see always in the response, we will tell you if it's a date format, what the date is and what the frequency is right here. So you see in the example, it was monthly. It said, hey, what I'm sending you is 4 digits for year dash 2 digits for month. We just did an annual query, and the API is describing itself and saying, okay, well, now I'm just going to give you 4-digit year. The frequency is annual. Is that what I asked for, API? Yes, here's the request. You asked for this, that, Colorado, sort by ascending, and your key. All right, we can still, now annual won't give us 5,000 rows, but you saw that the monthly did. Let's go back to the monthly request. Frequency equals monthly. Oh, because I picked on, monthly Colorado. All right, let me remove that facet. So let's say I want all residential information for all states in one call. That'll bust it. Yeah. Okay, 16,000 rows available. I can only give you 5,000. Well, what can we do there? Well, one thing we can do is lock in on a start and an end date. All right, API. Start 2012. 101. End equals 2013 0101. See, I went off script. This is think of the example I pulled 2007. Still works. Oh, okay. Here's 2012 for Indiana, 2012 Arizona, Florida, and you see we've gotten rid of that nasty you asked for too much data. And another technique you can use to limit down is using something called pagination. So if you want all this data, but you want to eat it in more digestible bites, you can use these commands: offset and length. So that's like how many data rows you want to go in or something. So in this case, if we stipulate offset 24, length 12, that means we'll go 2 months in. Let's get rid of start and end. Offset equals 24, length equals 12. See, live demo. What did I do wrong there? Hey, dev team. I found a bug. Okay, so we shouldn't be sending that warning. I'm gonna log that bug right after this call. See, told you it was live. All right. So using all these parameters all together now, who pays more, Virginia or Maryland? And we can write this monster query that will tell us, well, okay, I want the sector ID residential. Whoopsies. Don't click Luminati. Date. I want residential facet. I want Virginia. I want Maryland. I want to sort by state ID, and then I want to sort again by period. API key. Whoops, turn that off. X. Thank you. Here's the return. Virginia, 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 and we will see Maryland. It's sorted by year in descending because that's what I asked for. And then we'll get all the Virginias, and then we'll get all the Marylands. So that's the advanced hands-on. There are more ways to slice and dice the data, but you can see that you can actually customize your API calls to exactly what you want, as opposed to the pre-baked ones we gave you in APIv1. All right, let's get into migration tools, and then we have time for the Q&A. How are we doing on time? Oh, wow, I'm right on the mark. That never happens. All right, so you're on V1. We're making him go to V2. Here's how we can help you out. First of all, you can still use your V1 calls by using this route, series ID. We're still calling V2, but we're using all our lovely V1 series IDs that we love so much. So let's put that in. Goodbye, monster query. So we provided a series 1 ID with our API key, and it spat out the call as it would be from V1. Now you'll note it is a V2 response, so you may have to adjust your ingestion a little bit depending on how you wrote it. But this is standard JSON, so hopefully it's not too bad. The other thing you do other than a route is use our translator on our website. Let's go there. You can navigate directly to translate, or it's also right here on the Open Data site. Either way. So series 1 ID, what were we using? We were using Here it is. Elect sales. Elect sales. And you see it goes to the query browser and it builds for us. Boom. Thank you, dev team. That's awesome. Here's the call for a V2 equivalent. So if you're doing things a little more manually and you want to replace all your API calls in your code, you can do it this way too. Just cut and paste, and there's the call. Well, that's everything I prepared for a live demo for you all. So let's go on to the questions, and I'm grateful for all the backup panelists I have in case I get into deep water.
All right, thanks, Steve. So we have a lot of really good questions here. Some are duplicative, so I'll try to skip over those. So first is first. Hi there are time-sensitive weekly EIA data releases that are heavily relied on across the industry, particularly the natural gas storage report, the weekly petroleum status report, and others. With APIv1, this data is released with a delay of 2 to 3 hours compared to CSV and XLS formats. With APIv2, are there any other plans to minimize this delay?
That is a great question. Thank you, Morgan. We get that, everyone, and you're correct. These are market-moving data sources or reports. I would like to get them in the API faster, but there's a reason why they're not. It's because they are prepared under special security considerations because it is market-moving data, and we want everyone to get it at exactly the same time. So I mean, that data doesn't show up in our staging environments at all. That's in a separate little black box. So they release it at 10:30 to make sure everyone gets it at the same time, and then they do the work to migrate it into the API. So there will still be a delay because of those security considerations. I would like to minimize them as much as we can. So now that we've got V2 stabilized, we now enter the optimization mode. But that's more of a business process problem than a technical one. Fantastic question.
What in-browser JSON formatter viewer do you use?
Oh, that's a great question. Which one did I pull down? There are a ton. I think I got JSON mod. JSON formatter. That's the one I'm currently using, but there are a bunch. I mean, I run Google and Firefox, but the Google Play Store is going to have a lot. But yes, that's the one I'm using. Good question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there pagination functionality with the row limit, or do you need to specify a compliance series or time window?
I'm sorry, is that a compliance series and time window? Pagination works. Now, we did see in that demo that apparently we're throwing in a warning when maybe we shouldn't. So yes, pagination will get you beneath the 5,000 row limit, as we saw in that return, right? If we go back to that example, we paginated, there was only 259 rows, so we got everything we were supposed to get, and we didn't get trimmed. You can always also check this total field to see how many are responsive to your request.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Does the API team have any favorite stacks or libraries for consuming this API? I'm building a project in Python, and I'd like to take a look at their favorite libraries.
That is a great question. Hey, dev team, you want to weigh in?
I don't think we've even chatted about anything because we've been trying to review the questions as they're coming in and give Morgan whatever answers we could. I think we can get back to them. There's a couple that I think that have been good suggestions that we need to take back and look at.
Yeah, tell you what, if we can't give you the answer right now, let's look into when we post the slides, If we can't answer that question in the next 10 minutes, then we'll say some recommendations for you. So we'll post, if that's okay, Morgan. We'll try to post answers to questions we couldn't cover in this time. We'll put it on the open data site.
Absolutely, that sounds great. Here's another question. Any idea how many EIA single data sets have more than 5,000 rows?
Not at this time. We would have to run a monster database analysis to tell you that answer, because with an APIv2 call, of course, there are so many different parameters you could throw this way or that way, that would be really hard to iterate every single iteration and then count how many times we got a row return higher than 5,000. So you have me curious, but what the answer to that would be, but I think we'll probably get tasked to do some other things instead. But thank you for the question. That's an interesting one. Oh, if that is directed to, hey, I want to suck everything from the API, in version 2.1, we did restore the bulk download functionality because we know that was a fan favorite in V1. So that's available to you too. So you can just pull, if you want everything from petroleum or everything from electricity, you can download those from the open data site now.
All right, this question is from Steve, another Steve. I noticed that there are computed, generated, and consumed carbon intensity data values available in the download data on the dashboard. Are those values also available in the API, and if so, where?
I would have to explore. Well, you know what? I would use the query browser to answer that question. To see if it's there, because analysts, all our energy experts and analysts, if they say this is good for public consumption and it's good for the API, then it gets put in there. So what was it again? We'll just really quick see if we can find it.
It was computed, generated, and consumed carbon intensity data values.
Oh, okay. I would think that's an I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. I would think that's an electricity somewhere, if it's carbon intensity, or if they're talking about vehicles and carbon intensity. There's a lot of places where that shows up. I know that they're working on that for the hourly grid monitor, because that was in a working session on that, where they want to put that baked into that tool. If it goes into that tool, it will definitely show up in the API in that context.
All right, so from Roger, we have, with APIv1, there's an updates endpoint that can return the last updated timestamp for each series ID at any given time. This endpoint is very useful for ensuring timely data ingestion, but seems no longer supported with APIv2. Can you please consider re-adding support for the updates functionality?
Absolutely. That's a great feedback point. We do want to do it. And when you see the slides, I could scroll back, but that is something we know we would very much like to address in 2.2 or beyond. It's on the wish list. We actually had it running in V2, and because of the way V2 operates, V1 was pre-baked. So when that static job ran, we could say, oh, here's when the job ran, here's the date the data was posted. Because V2, when you make an API call, it actually reaches out to several EIA databases that are publicly cleared to say, okay, that's good, that's good. So it's reaching all over the place. And when we try to compute the last updated field, depending on which database and rows we hit, it killed the API performance. So the good news is, if you're calling APIv2, you are getting the most recent approved data that EIA has, barring a data push problem or what have you, that's available to the API. We know last updated is something people want, but for performance reasons, we had to kill it. Now that we're in an optimization mode, we would really like to put that back in. So good point.
All right, from Daniel, can you sort by multiple columns in the API call?
Why, yes, and you saw it here. So here's an example. So you can just, we're really building an array here, right? So here we said sort 0, zero ordinal, right? State descending, and sort one by period description. So yes, that's supported. I hear the database administrators screaming when I say, look at all these crazy queries you can write. We did, before we released V2, we did some really extensive load testing against all the routes, and that's where we came up with the 5,000 row limit and the API key throttles that we use if someone gets too aggressive. And that was as a result of how much can, to quote Scotty, how much can Yogo take? Thank you.
So what are the V2 throttles?
That is a great question, and we get it a lot. And my friends in cybersecurity, understandably, don't want me to say the exact numbers, although we know them, out of the concern that if we say the speed limit is 60 miles an hour, everyone's going to go 59 miles per hour. So we have some pre-baked copy on that. I can read it to you, but it's in the FAQ. More or less, I want to say you're generally safe if under 300 an hour in sustained mode and 5 a second in burst mode. If you stay beneath those, you're free and clear. The limits are actually higher than that, but we don't publish the exact number, but that should keep you safe. I'll confirm that because that's standard language we put out when, if you email us, that we have standard language to say this is the safe value. The reason why we do that is to make sure the API is available for everyone. Again, the load test, we don't want anyone accidentally, which is typically where V1 used to have trouble. Someone would write a really great script that would kill us, and we didn't have the automatic throttling in V1. We had to actually look at the logs and say, hey, who's in the database? So V2 and V1, because it's under the architecture, can auto-detect that. And every now and again, we get someone who's intentionally trying to be naughty, but we've got defenses for that.
Do we plan to provide a way to get revised data?
Revised data. Oh, I see. Okay. I'm assuming that question is not last updated, but historical data. So EIA does, is that correct, Morgan? Is that how you read it?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. That is a common request. Well, common request, it's a common issue, I should say, and not just API related. And so like in STIO, we will sometimes revise the numbers, especially forecasts that we provide saying, oh, this happened or that happened, or, oh, we think the number is actually this. We would like to do that. Obviously, that grows our data corpus by orders of magnitude. It is something I would like to see, but I don't think it's in the near term because that is a whole infrastructure shift for EIA.
Can the 860M and 923 data be downloaded via API?
Well, here's where I say I'd have to look up what those survey numbers are, so I will get back to you on that.
Do you have any resources for Tableau integration?
We don't, because EIA doesn't run Tableau on the public website, so the web team doesn't get to interact with it. I do know there's, from internal uses, Tableau has 2 pre-baked things. I want to say it's their web connector and Hyper API. And of course, there are a bunch of third-party utilities that will let you do that too. I want to say Hyper API is correct. Yes, it is. So those are 2 things from Tableau you can use.
Are there any recommendations on the most efficient way to interface between Excel and EIA API v2?
Well, we do have efficient ways. We do have the Excel plugin, which you can download from the Open Data site, and that makes, it'll add a little toolbar on your Excel, and with that, you can build API2 queries and have those drive directly into your spreadsheet.
from Rory. Is there a way to search the API either programmatically or with the browser like we saw in APIv1 browser?
The search is exploring the routes. So yes, there is. We don't use like Solar or a search engine because we have the programmatic way that I demoed right here now. If have your program say, oh, look at these arrays and do a recursion, and there's your search.
Can you provide some tips to locate API info from the reports pages? Example, weekly natural gas storage report, weekly coal markets report, etc.
I mean, there are ways. So we'll put that in feedback. I'll talk to our web content teams that actually drive the content of the website and see if they can't cross-link. That's a good point.
Given the global nature of energy markets, is there an appetite to add additional international energy data sets for European gas storage?
I would have to defer to our international data team. We've got a whole group that focuses just on that. So I would ask them. I could follow up, but as a blanket statement, you know, EIA is all about, man, if we can get more data into the API, let's do it. So if it's available and we can, you know, responsibly do it, I'd say, yeah, we like to release data.
So we are right at 2 minutes until 2. We do have one other question here, and then we'll have to wrap it up. Are there plans for Excel and Google Sheets add-ins for V2?
Yes, for the Excel, yes, that's out there now. Just download it from our open data page. I'd love to go into it, and I had to cut the Excel because Excel is a whole other rabbit hole to dive down. That we probably have a webinar just on the Excel add-in. But you can pull down the Excel add-ins for V2 right here. I would very much, and you saw that in the roadmap, we would very much like to get the Google Sheet back as well. We know that's popular, and I think it's good to have multiple platforms. That was a resourcing issue and an internal EI discussion, but yes, we would very much like to do that, and it's in the queue.
All right, and with that, we are at the end of our webinar. Steve, do you have any final words?
That sounds fatalistic. We have some links here. If you haven't used open data, I want to thank my public affairs team, Morgan, and the web developers for making this whole thing possible. All the analysts behind us, and most importantly, thank you all for joining us today. And thanks for your interest and passion in EIA's data.